Good morning, folks. Welcome to Lord's Day Live. Glad to have you with me. Got a lot to cover this morning, so hope you got your paper and pencil out because we're about to launch into the Bible class section of Lord's Day Live. If I can get my glasses shined up here, seem like I got a smudge trying to get ready for this morning. Hope spring weather is as pretty in your area as it is in mine. Boy, it's beautiful here, and I'm loving it. I am loving it. So, first day of the week, Lord's Day. Let's get after this live. Bible class. Again, I probably made way too much about this, but I haven't had many people request this book. In this book that I wrote some years ago, I established what I believe is irrefutable evidence that the Bible is from God, miraculously protected throughout the ages, and because it is from God and protected as it is, we can trust it. And since we can trust it, there is no book on the planet that's more important for us to internalize than the Bible. And so if you'll send me your email address, I'm happy to send you a free email copy of this little booklet. But that leads us to geohistory of the Bible. That's where we have been going over the last several weeks. We're going to continue this morning as we're doodling the Bible. Doodling the Bible. I suspect that you're as I am, and you like to doodle, and maybe you're not very good at it. I certainly am not. But I think that you've seen over the last several weeks that it doesn't take a lot of talent, but if we can get it in our minds, the most important book in all the Bible, or all the world, the Bible, if we can get it in our minds, then we'll be able to reproduce it as far as in our conversation is concerned, etc. And instead of just quoting the preacher or quoting some Reformation leader or famous author or whatever it may be, we can quote God, quote the Bible. So let's get after the doodle. Again, by way of review, remember, boot, blob, banana boat with bubbles being balanced beside balloons. You see the boot, the blob, the banana, the boat, the bubbles being balanced. Remember the beside balloons, and you got the Persian Gulf over here. And so those are things that we need to keep in our minds. I'm just doing that real briefly because I want you to continue to review those things. And teachers, you need to go over those as often as possible with your students, because I know it's a silly phrase, but if you can remember it, it'll help you to recreate the Bible lands, which we're going to transition into eventually. Right now we're in the timeline, but eventually you're going to see how these two things come together. And we're going to be able to take an event that maybe a preacher uses in a sermon, or we've been reading through the Bible and we come to a particular passage, and we're going to be able to not only understand where that event happens in the timeline, but we're also going to be able to take it to a geographic point on the map. And so it'll be very important for our Bible study. So boot, blob, banana boat with bubbles being balanced beside balloons. All right, got your paper? Well, here's where we're going to begin to doodle some this morning. Now, by way of review, again, go up here and get you your 3 dots. And you got your line of continuance. Or, I mean, the dots are, I guess, the dots of continuance, aren't you? Then you got your historic line there. And we're going to draw everything above the line because we've got so much to put down below. Let there be. Remember, that's creation. Bookends of the timeline. Over here, you've got us. Okay, that's us. And so we're the other bookend of the timeline. You got the dots of continuation because we got eternity back here and we got eternity eventually out there. But this is all that we know with regards to the timeline. Then you take and you divide our timeline into thirds. And I keep doing that. I got to stop doing that because we got a lot of stuff to put up there. So we're just going to draw small lines from now on, okay? Divide your timeline into thirds. And remember, these are each about 2,000 years apiece, approximately. Meaning that the earth is really only about 2,000 years old. The first 2,000 years in, we're going to draw us a tent, and that's supposed to represent Abraham. Another 2,000 years later, we draw the cross. Obviously, that represents Jesus, the greatest event of all history. So, 2,000 Abraham, another 2,000 Jesus, another 2,000 approximately us. Okay, now we're going to take and we're going to divide the first period in half. And we draw us our little boat, and that's Noah. Again, I realize all of this is review. And then you take and you divide the second part in half, and you're going to get the Star of David representing the kingdoms, right? And that's when Israel, the kingdoms, and all that takes place. And then just 100 years into the first century, what is that? Approximately 70 years after Jesus' death. 77 years after Jesus' death. You draw another line. That's 100 years into the first century, and you got the Bible. The Bible is completed. All right, we got all of those. All right, now we come back here again, and we can do another one. What is this? Anybody remember? Yep. That's the Ten Commandments. So you got David there, and then you divide this one almost in half, not quite, because that's 400 years, not 500, but that's approximately right. And you got another word bubble with a question mark because that's silence. God doesn't give us any prophecy during that period. All right, with that, then you've got the timeline, all the basic things that you need to know with regards to spots on the timeline. And then last week, as you might recall, we started dividing things. And so I took you here and I asked you to draw this line like this. And we had these lines down here. And you might recall that in this first section I suggested to you, we drew the little world. Let's see if I can do this here. There's our little world. Got the ball of water. Got the sun shining its rays on it. Okay, that's the canopy theory. That's a pretty pitiful sun, but anyhow, you get it. That's the canopy theory. That's why people were living so long back in the day, I believe, is because you have you've got the ball of water that's surrounding the planet. I really am not happy with that. I'm sorry, folks, but I'm just not happy with that particular doodle. Let's see if we can do something else here. Let's get this these rays going like that. Is that a little bit better? That's supposed to be the sun. I don't know if that's even it. Anyhow. But there you go. That's our planet, and there you go. Canopy theory, that's why they're living so long. I can't review that. Go back and watch the last one if you need to. And then the second 1,000 years was governed. Remember, we did the thing. We put the... That's the Tower of Babel. And the Tower of Babel, as you might recall, that's when all the folks on earth, after Noah gets off the boat, again, he gets the command by God that Adam and Eve got, and that is to go and to fill the earth, replenish the earth. But the folks don't want to scatter out. They don't want to fill the earth. They want to stay together and make a name for themselves, so they start to build a tower. God has to confuse their languages, and in the process, they are scattered. So there you go. There's your Tower of Babel. All right, now what we're going to do, this is new material this morning, is we want to draw another line here up until Moses, and another line here up until David. Okay, and I got lots of stuff to put in there. I probably should have made my thing a little bit bigger, but anyhow, it is what it is. So, first 1,000 years, Noah, that's governed by this whole idea of them living. Many of them were living up to 1,000 years. 969 years, the longest recorded fellow we got in the Bible, Methuselah. Remember that? And then after they get off the boat, the whole idea of God wanting them to spread out. And so we even have the Tower of Babel making that happen. All right, what happens then in between Abraham and... Forgot we're supposed to make these extra dark, right? Because these are major spots on our timeline. What happens between Abraham and David? So this is 1,000 years. Divide that into half. You got about a 500-year mark, right? So 500 years in, you got Moses. Another 500 years in, you got David. What governs this period, this 500-year period of time? Well, I'm going to suggest to you that it's actually a series of names. Now, before we go there, I want you to draw yourself a little, that's supposed to look like a pyramid. I don't know if I did a very good job. But Egypt plays in a big way in this time period right here. Let's go all the way back. Obviously, you got Abraham. So you go ahead, Abraham. I didn't leave myself enough room. Abraham. Who's the son of Abraham? Abraham gives birth to Ishmael. That's exactly right. And actually, Ishmael was the first son of Abraham, but that's not the child of promise, because remember, Abraham has a child with the handmaiden, because Sarah and Abraham, they just couldn't wait. You know, and maybe God needs us to kind of take things into our own hands here. And God says, no, I got this. But anyhow, they have that child, and that child is named Ishmael. By the way, that's who Muhammad, the prophet of Islam, believes that his greatness comes from. Don't believe that he can even trace his lineage back there, but that's who he claims. And by the way, it wasn't a very good move on his part, because Ishmael is prophesied in the Bible to become a wild donkey of a man. He wasn't a very nice fellow. Anyhow, Abraham, eventually, he and Sarah, his actual wife, are going to give birth to a little boy, and his name is what? Isaac. That's exactly right, Isaac. So you got Abraham, Isaac. Now, who is Isaac? Who's Isaac going to give birth to? Esau. Exactly. But that's not the child of promise. Remember, we have the twins that are born, and the second, forgive the terminology, but the second child out was actually the child of promise. Esau, and who's the other guy? Jacob. Exactly. Jacob. So write Jacob here. Now, here's where it's really going to be important. We're going to put a parenthesis under Jacob, because Jacob is going to have his name changed to Israel. He's going to eventually have his name changed to Israel. That's where we get the 12 tribes of Israel, which leads us into the next section. Okay, Abraham gives birth to Isaac. Isaac gives birth to Jacob. Jacob gives birth to, yep, you're right, 12 sons. Boy, I wish I'd left myself more room. I hope you can read that. 12 sons are going to be born to Jacob. Thus, you've got the 12 tribes of Israel. Okay, and when we get to the promised land later on, I'm going to show you this with regards to doodling the map and all that. But we're going to get to the promised land. They're going to divide up the promised land into 12 sections, and each of these children are going to get part of the land. Now, that's not completely right. Joseph's boys get, we'll talk about that when we get there. All right, so we got 12 sons from Jacob, and then the most famous son of those 12 sons is Joseph. Joseph. Hope you can read that. All right, and Joseph is going to lead us to Egypt. But he's not the first. That's not the first time we show up in Egypt. Actually, we show up several times prior to that. Abraham's going to show up there, etc., etc. But the reason we got the pyramid down here is to remind us that during this period, this 500 years between Abraham and Moses, we've got a lot of Egypt stuff going on. And a lot of, wandering around. They're in the promised land a lot and that kind of thing too, but it's not actually the promised land in the sense that it's a fulfillment at that point. It's just a promised land that someday they're going to have. That all of that transpires within here as well. But we got the covenant that's going to be made with Abraham, and then we're going to move in this 500-year period between Abraham all the way up until Moses comes. Now, you remember the story. Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. Jacob has 12 sons. One of them is Joseph. Joseph's going to be sold into slavery. He's going to save his people, eventually becoming second in command over Egypt. Going to save Egypt, most of the known world for that matter, because of the wisdom that comes to him through God. And he's going to save his folks. They're going to move to Egypt. And a lot of time is going to transpire. In that time, a Pharaoh is going to come to the throne. He doesn't remember Joseph, and he doesn't appreciate the Hebrew children, and he's going to enslave them. And you remember how that takes place. Moses, by the miracle of God, Moses survives the attempt to kill off all the Hebrew baby boys. And you might recall the princess, she draws him out of the Nile. He's raised right there, kind of at the feet of Pharaoh, right there, in the palace. But eventually, he sees the taskmaster, the slave driver, and he's beating up on one of the Hebrews. Anyhow, he kills that guy, and he has to run off into the wilderness. Moses' life can be divided into three 40-year periods. 40-year periods. 40, 40, 40. This is Moses' life. It's going to be, well, you know what? I shouldn't have done that there. Why am I'm getting ahead of myself. Okay, erase that. Did everybody I hope you're doing it in pencil because Sonny just made a mistake. Baloney breath. We are no longer in that 500 years, are we? We have transitioned over here. I don't know what I was thinking, but anyhow, we're over here. Moses' life can be divided into three 40-year periods. And I don't have enough room to write them all in here, so I'm just going to have to give you a letter, and you write it on your paper, okay? The first 40-year period, he's actually in Egypt. So he's being raised and all of those kind of things, and probably was a very influential person in Egypt until he kills that guy. Then he's got to run, and so the second 40-year period he is spending in the wilderness. Actually, he's a shepherd in the wilderness. And that might actually be a better term because, boy, I am making all kinds of mistakes here today. Let's go S with this one. Shepherd. And the reason is because the third 40-year period of his life he is going to spend wandering around in the wilderness with the children of Israel. And so I was going to have him in the wilderness 2 40-year periods, which is essentially the truth. But in between those 2 40s, he's going to go back to Egypt. He's going to free the people. We're going to have all the 10 plagues. All of that kind of stuff is going to happen. Okay? And so it's really important that you know that. All right. Because I didn't leave myself enough room, and I'm almost out of time, I'm going to do something here that's going to throw everybody off. But hey, this whole class has been a little bit on the odd side too. I want you to go over here and I want you to give you an arrow because I need you to know that within this 500-year period, another very, very, very important thing takes place. And that is, obviously, we're going to get the law. And part of the law is going to be the worship of God. I want you to draw a box kind of like this, and I want a rectangle. And what we're going to do is we're going to identify the tabernacle. The tabernacle, which, by the way, will eventually become the pattern for the temple. The tabernacle, however, is a temporary, portable worship place. When I say temporary, it wasn't very temporary in the sense that they didn't use it very much. They did. But it was temporary in the sense that it only stayed in one spot for a little while. I heard my father say just recently in one of the studies he's doing in the book of Hebrews, I think he said that while they were wandering around in the wilderness for 40 years, that the tabernacle moved something like 42 different times. So it's constantly being picked up and moved to another spot, almost on a yearly basis, it seems. This is the tabernacle. If you were in a helicopter, obviously they didn't have it back in the day, but if you were in a helicopter looking straight down on the tabernacle, you would see this tented off room. Tented off room? You see this tent with two rooms. Boy, I can't even talk today. But anyhow, the first part is called the holy place. The second part is called the most holy place. But before we get there, there was two things outside the tabernacle that were very, very important. First one's a square, and the second one's a zero, or a circle. This first one's called the altar of burnt offerings. So when they brought their offerings and they brought their sacrifices, this is where they were burnt. Then you have the laver, L-A-V-E-R, the laver. We'll review this again in times to come. The laver was basically is a wash basin. They were able to wash their hands. So it was a very bloody process when they're making the sacrifice. They wash their hands so they're clean when they go into the holy place. This is the holy place. When they go into the holy place, there are going to be three pieces of furniture in the holy place. The table of shewbread, the candlestick, 7 candles, and the altar of incense. The altar of incense. And the altar of incense stood right here before this curtain. And inside the most holy place, or some people call it the Holy of Holies, there was another piece of furniture. Anybody know what that was called? You know, the Ark of the Covenant. The Ark of the Covenant. If you've seen Raiders of the Lost Ark, you remember that they opened it up and everybody's face melted and all that kind of a thing. You remember that? Okay. Well, that's a fictional depiction, but this was what they were talking about. The Ark of the Covenant was kept right in here inside the most holy place. The reason that was significant is because that was the mercy seat of God. It's where his dwelling was. And you might recall that during the day, there was a cloud that hovered just over the tabernacle. And during the night, there was a pillar of fire that hovered and that was the symbolic representation of God here among us. Okay? And that hovered right over the tabernacle. Inside the Ark of the Covenant, and again, we'll review this in times to come, but inside the Ark of the Covenant, there were 3 things. Can you tell me what they were? 3 things. Number 1, a pot of manna. We'll talk about that eventually. Manna was like bread-like stuff that fell out of the heavens that God fed his people with while they were walking around in the wilderness. And by the way, he made quail come right into the camp so they could pick it up and go in and roast them a quail. Pretty cool. But anyhow, got a pot of manna. What's the other one? Aaron's rod. Aaron had a rod. It was a big stick. And of course, it had been, dead for a long time because it was, cut off a tree or whatever it may be. It was kind of his walking stick or whatever he used. But it budded. Because of the miraculous power of God, it actually budded, meaning it was still alive. And then there's a third thing. It's the most famous of all. You've probably already said it. 10 Commandments, exactly. All 3 of those things were kept inside the Ark of the Covenant. Okay? So, let's go back and review. You've got folks living almost 1,000 years because of the canopy theory. You've got folks sticking around, and God said, no, I want you to scatter out, so we got the Tower of Babel. You've got folks in this, and obviously those 2 are 1,000 years each. We're now going to bust it down into 500 years, okay? The next 500 years between Abraham and Moses, you've got Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, 12 sons, one of which is Joseph. That takes them to Egypt. They survive there, etc. But eventually Moses comes along and he has to free his people from Egypt. Moses lives 120 years. First 40 he's going to be in Egypt. Second 40 he's going to be a shepherd in Midian. And then the third 40, he is going to be wandering around the wilderness with God's folks. One of the things that happens during the wilderness is they go down to Mount Sinai, and Mount Sinai is where God tells them how to build the tabernacle. And so you got the tabernacle with the various things that we have described there. I am out of time, and so I've got to stop right there. But here we go. Oh, we got to come over here. Almost hit the wrong button. See that? Q&A. Oh, you know what? you're not going to be able to see the Q&A because Sonny Childs has to wipe this down. I'll tell you what, sometimes I really don't know about myself. It's been one of those classes, hasn't it? I'm sorry if any of you are writing in pen and then I did that and you had to erase. Oh, you probably didn't erase because you're in pen. Now you're mad at me. All right, here's your questions, teachers. Take a picture of this. Who was Abraham's son according to God's promise? I did that. Of Abraham's twin grandsons, which one did God favor? I did that. How many sons did Abraham's grandson have? Oh, yeah, I did that. I'm just trying to make sure I got them all in. Which of these sons was sold into slave? Got that. What were the names of the 2 rooms of the tabernacle? 2 pieces of furniture that stood outside the tabernacle, 3 pieces inside the holy place, and 3 historical items that they kept inside the Ark of the Covenant. You ought to be able to answer all those from what I just told you. We did halfway decent today, didn't we? I'm glad you're with me. This is Lord's Day Live in the doodling part. Take a picture of that, teachers, and enter into discussion. Or stick with me and go through the prayer time before you do that, because that's what comes next. Oh, no, it doesn't. I got to tell you something. I'm right now, actually, this is being recorded and put up later, but I'm actually right now in Arkansas recording this. But when you see it, I will right now be in Pine Prairie, Louisiana, about to get into the pulpit, get to preach for my good friends in Pine Prairie, Louisiana. And then I'm going to pedal from there down to Jennings and visit some friends. And then I'm going to go over on Tuesday, and I'm going to be at the Oak Grove Church of Christ near Amite, north of Hammond, and I get to preach there. And then in April, I'm coming back to Louisiana. Mark these dates down. I'd love to see you. Give you a hug when I come to Louisiana if you happen to live in that great state. Now let's do our prayer time that I mentioned earlier. I told you last time that a very dear friend of mine, a mentor of mine, Brother Harry Coltis, has gone on to be with the Lord. Godly man. His dear wife continues to struggle in old age, and asked that you be in prayer for Miss Kate as well. But they had a celebration of his life last week, and what a wonderful, wonderful fellow. Remember Harry, please. Harry's good. Remember Miss Kate and his family. Doug. Very good friend that I'm going to pedal here, hopefully, tomorrow morning, and I'm going to get to go and see Doug and to have some prayer time with Doug. He's got cancer, and we're real concerned for Doug because he's another one of my mentors. Denise, head cook at MAP, really need her. Continues to wait on, really it's the insurance company to let her know that she can have the procedure necessary to relieve her of all this pain. Please ask that God will move in the hearts of whoever makes those decisions so that my dear friend Denise can have that surgery. Tina and Linda continue to be survivors of breast cancer, but I pray that you'll continue to watch over them because there's other things that come along with that, so that they, have to heal and mend and all of that. And please remember Tina and Linda. Clara, the daughter of 2 good friends that I have in Indiana, they asked that I pray for Clara and to bring her before your attention. Got colon cancer, so we do that at this time. Velma continues to be struggling with the aging process. Her 2 sweet, sweet daughters, very, very good to me in my ministry. Please pray that her daughters, the daughters of Velma, will be able to take care of her, and that Miss Velma will be at peace and healthy as God wills it. And then lastly, Luke from Kentucky, we continue to have him on our prayer list because various epilepsy, migraines, a lot of hurts. And remember Luke, that God will bless him. Those are all the folks that I have on my prayer list. I didn't get any new this week. I guess is where I was going with that. And so if you have prayer requests and are willing to put them before the world that watches these things, please send them my way. And as you see there, again, I'm only going to give their first name and where they're from, and what's the thing we're praying for. But if you would send me those prayer requests, you can post them right here or whatever, and I do my very best to jot those down and get them in the next time that we have prayer time. So there you go. We're going to take a few minutes to pray about those things. While you're praying, I'm going to transition into the sermon time. And so if you will, be praying, please. Good morning, my friends. Welcome to Lord's Day Live, the sermon time. Having a beautiful day here. I pray that it's beautiful there. We completed last time a series on involvement. I pray that that has been a blessing to you. We are in the process right now of trying to package that so that if you wanted to, you could go on my website and you could actually get it in one package deal, so that you didn't have to wade through the various other things, the Bible class, etc., etc. You just have the 5 lessons. Actually, there were 6 lessons on that particular series. And so watch for that, and we'll try to make you aware of it when it comes time. This morning, however, kind of transitioning. This won't be a series. We'll probably do a lot of that on Lord's Day Live, but this will just be a one-timer. If you're happy and you know it, 3 keys to holy happiness. If you're happy and you know it. You know the little song, if you're happy and you know it, clap your hands, stomp your feet, say amen, all of those things. And how cute it is to watch the children when they come up front and they go through the motions with regards to that. But I had this on my heart several weeks ago, and I just kind of was thinking it through and meditating on it and studying about it. And happiness, happiness can be so fleeting, can it? It can be rather superficial at times. It doesn't have to be. I believe that there is a holy happiness that lasts. And that's what we really want to talk about this morning, this holy happiness that you can put your hands around and grab it and say, this is mine. I claim it because of what Jesus has done for me. But before we go there, let's kind of go to the superficial, because we also experience that. I've been putting out some church bloopers on my Facebook page, and I found these to be extra funny. And so these are misprints, mistakes, I don't know how you put that, in the bulletin. And this will show you the superficial side to happiness. Not that there's anything necessarily wrong with that, but we're going to giggle about it, and then we're going to move right on to something else. It doesn't, hang on to it. And so I'm trying to give you a contrast between what you kind of giggle about for a moment and then move on, and what you can actually live in, you can bask in. And so that's what the sermon's about. But to give you that contrast, here's 3 sillies, bloopers from the bulletin, church bulletins. For those of you who have children and don't know it, there's a nursery at the back. How do you have a child not know it? But anyhow, commas are so very, very important. Second blooper out of a church bulletin somewhere. Evening sermon. Titled, What is Hell Like? Come early and hear the choir practice. Oh my. Surely the choir's not that bad. And then, ladies, you'll appreciate this one. I'm not sure that the guys will, but ladies will appreciate this. This was a post in some bulletin somewhere. Ladies, please support the church rummage sale. It's a great way to get rid of all that stuff laying around the house. Be sure to bring your husband. Because he's laying around the house. Anyhow, the superficial nature of happiness. We got to be careful with that. Because I think it kind of represents to the world that we are kind of fluffy and superficial and don't have a lot of rationale with regards to our religious pursuits. I don't have any problems saying those little funnies, and I often do. But that's not really the heart of our happiness, is it? It's not really what it's all about. And so let me try to give you an illustration before I launch into these 3 points on how that you can have lasting, ongoing, holy happiness. See if I can illustrate it for you. Late November, early December each year, the family and I do something that I guess it's unique to us. We call it Thanksmas. Thanksmas. It's a combination of Thanksgiving and Christmas smashed together. And the reason we've done this is because now that Bryson is married and has his own child and all that, it can be hard to get everybody together on the holidays. And we don't want the holidays to be a stressful time, a time that you dread. We want to enjoy getting together. So Cindy and I got this idea that instead of choosing the date for Thanksgiving and the date for Christmas and, trying to make sure that our family was together specifically on those dates, we find a time in between those two that we could have Thanksmas, a combination of the two, at a time when it wasn't so stressful. Anyhow, we get off and go to a place where some other friends have provided us, and it's just kind of a little mini vacation that we take together. But here's my illustration. This past year at Thanksmas, I was sitting in my recliner, and I was just observing what was going on around about me. To my left Bryson and Gabriel were sitting on the couch. Each of them had a guitar, and they were strumming and singing various songs. I don't think they were Christmassy songs, although they might have been. But they were just singing, and they were doing the harmony thing, and they were playing together, and it just was like crazy good. I just really, really enjoyed it. Immediately in front of me and across the room was the miniature tree that we take with us when we travel off to this place. It's probably just that. It's just real small. But one of the reasons we got a miniature tree is because it's less hassle, etc. And we've got a 2-year-old in the family. Judah. Everybody loves Judah. Curly hairs, all that kind of thing. But Judah was sitting at the tree and doing what children do, wanting to touch everything on the tree, etc. Cindy's got this little, what do you call it? It's a manger scene, VeggieTale style. Well, Judah was sitting at the tree with the manger scene, the VeggieTale characters playing and having a big time, and I was enjoying watching him, hearing my sons, watching my grandson. Now, to my right and around the corner, it's an open kind of a living room, so I could still see them if I looked over my shoulder. But to my right and back here is the kitchen. And Cindy, my wife, and Victoria, my daughter-in-law, were back there cooking something for supper. I don't remember what it was, but it smelled heavenly. And I'm sitting in my recliner, somewhat in the middle of it all, just enjoying the moment. And all of a sudden, it came to me. I'm happy. This is a happy moment. Now, go back to our little phrase that you got in front of you. If you're happy and you know it. It's kind of an odd phrase. If you're happy and you know it, so you can be happy and not know it? I think so. In fact, I think we spend a lot of our time in life in happy moments without really appreciating the happiness of the moment, without really knowing it, embracing it, without basking in it. And so that's the purpose of this particular lesson, to teach you how to get to holy happiness and hold on to it, because that's the desire of God's heart for you. 3 passages that we're going to look at, but before we go there, let me share with you a few lines out of a song called Breathe by Michael W. Smith, one of my wife's favorite religious singers. Really has some powerful stuff. This is the air I breathe. This is the air I breathe. Your holy presence living in me, he writes. This is my daily bread, etc. He says, I'm desperate for you. And then he concludes by saying, this is the air I breathe. This is the air I breathe. Your holy presence living in me. Powerful. Breathe. We breathe in the air. We breathe in the oxygen. And it gives us that which sustains life. I want to suggest to you that happiness is part of that. And in order to remember these 3 keys on the journey to holy happiness that really lasts, we're going to take the word air, A-I-R, and use them as our 3 points. Hopefully that'll help you to remember it. The A in air stands for acknowledgement. Notice this passage from Psalm 65, verse 8. The whole earth is filled with awe at your wonders. Where morning dawns, where evening fades, you call forth songs of joy. God is the source of true happiness. God is the source of true awe and joy. And it says that the whole earth is filled with awe at his wonders, the wonders that he has provided us. Romans chapter 1 tells us that there really isn't such a thing as a true atheist. There are those who live in denial. There are those who like to call themselves atheists, but I don't believe there's actually anybody who doesn't truly believe that there's a supreme being. And the reason for that is because that's basically what he says in Romans chapter 1, and he says, therefore we are without excuse. And also, he says in Romans chapter 1, because all you got to do is look out at the wondrous things that are created around about you, and you know, if there's design in that little leaf, there has to be a designer. And so we are in awe. Now, we may live in rebellion towards that thought. We may run from it, keep ourselves as busy as possible so that we don't have to be convicted by it. But the fact of the matter is, all of us know that there's a supreme being. And we're in awe at his wonders. Now, back to our point. The first thing that you have to do, if you're going to have holy happiness, and you're going to actually grab it and maintain it in your life, is you got to acknowledge it. I think this is the area that probably we as Christians struggle with the most. It's not that we're not happy. It's just that we don't take time to allow ourselves to be happy or to celebrate the happiness. Maybe that's a better way of putting it. Be still and know that I am God. Yes, we have to stop and acknowledge this is a moment of happiness. Going back to my illustration, thanks, miss. I'm sitting in my recliner, got all these things happening around about me. Why did it take me so long to recognize I'm happy? Because, that's kind of the way it is. It kind of sneaks up on you. God didn't design it to be something that you have to necessarily manipulate. He designed it so that it's something that you can discover and enjoy and be a part of. And so in order for us to have lasting happiness, we've got to acknowledge it. We've got to look around us and say, well, look at there. Isn't that something? Isn't that special? And so we have to take time to acknowledge it. May I say this, and I'll move on to my second point. You move too fast. I know that's true because it's the average concept in America today, and it's actually true of me as well. We're running too fast. We've got to slow down. Our children do not have time to find God because we are pushing them so fast through all the paces of going to school, going to extracurricular activities, getting their homework done, all of that stuff. They don't have time to stop and be in awe of the wonders of God. And that's why we're losing 70+% of our high school graduates leave the church, never come back, many of them, because parents never gave them a chance to acknowledge the air they should be breathing, to acknowledge the happiness that's around about them. If I could give the American family one thing, it would be an acknowledgement of God because they just slow down. They would be still. And in the stillness, I think that they would discover that there is a God. I think it's the reason that we run so fast is because if we discover there's a God, then we discover that we are accountable to that God, and nobody wants to go there. But be mature, be disciplined, help your children arrive at a place where they will have a faith that will carry them on after you're dead and gone, because they discovered God in the quiet stillness. They acknowledged Him in the moments of happiness. Number 2, the I in air, this is the air I breathe, your holy presence, the happiness. The I is interpret. It's not good enough to just acknowledge it happened. Now we got to sit down and we got to ask ourselves, how did this happen? Why is this happening to me? Go back to my illustration with Thanksmas. You know, I'm sitting in my recliner and I'm enjoying the music that's over here. And I'm thinking to myself, well, how did that happen? I'll tell you how it happened, because Cindy and I intentionally made sure that our boys, as they were growing up, had the opportunity to be creative, to engage, and to enjoy. And both of them have enjoyed playing the piano and playing the guitar. And I even did my best at times. I played the drums every once in a while because Bryson, he always wanted to have him a band. And so Dad would be the drummer. And so I played the drums because I just wanted to make sure. So I had to interpret, how did this happiness moment come? There's my little grandson over there playing with the various things, you know, with VeggieTales, etc. How innocence? Here's a little boy who's sitting in front of the Christmas tree, actually looking into a manger scene that represents Jesus by, I think it's a little pea, a little green pea, wrapped in swaddling clothes, But in his innocence, he can celebrate Christian. He can celebrate Christianity. And then my wife and my daughter-in-law back here cooking, and I'm thinking, I got to interpret this. What's bringing happiness? Happiness is the smells, the aromas, the sensations, the fact that we're going to sit down at the table and enjoy time together as a family. Interpret it. Don't just acknowledge that I'm happy and then run on to something else. Stop and interpret, how did I get here? You see, that's why I think the world is so enamored by things that give them temporary happiness. Everybody likes to go through the drive-thru and get it as fast as possible, because then you don't have to wait. You can just consume it and just boom, and you're on to the next thing. But it doesn't really satisfy. There's no lasting satisfaction there. Same thing is true if you find your happiness at the bottom of a bottle. Drinking is not going to make you happy. And one of the reasons that I know that at least give you lasting happiness is because you don't take time to interpret it. And if you did want to take time to interpret it, you got such a hangover, a buzz going on, that you can't even think of straight as to what's happening with regards to these things. If you want true lasting happiness, don't do something that's going to cause you to lose your ability to reason. Instead, do everything possible to slow down so that you can reason. Acknowledge it, then interpret it. See this passage in Luke chapter 2, 16 and following. So they hurried off and they found Mary and Joseph and the baby who was lying in the manger. When they had seen him, they spread the word concerning what had been told them about this child. And all who heard it were amazed at what the shepherds said to them. Pause. So you got the shepherds, it's been announced to them by the angels, they went in to find the baby, there's the baby, they're amazed, and so they go away and they're now talking about the baby. But what does Mary do? Verse 19. But Mary treasured up all these things and what? Pondered them in her heart. You know what she was doing? She was interpreting a happy moment. The joy of bringing a child into the world. This is my boy. my child. She's reflecting on the announcement that the angel Gabriel had given to her earlier. She's thinking about the fact that all of these things are going to come about, that I'm giving birth to the Messiah. What does that mean? She's interpreting the happy moment. If you want to have lasting, holy happiness, you got to acknowledge it, and you got to take time to interpret it. Number 3. The last thing is you got to relish it. Relish it. Now this is going to take it just to one step higher. Because it's one thing to say, yeah, that happened. It's another thing to rationalize and figure out how it happened. But relish takes you to a point where you just bask in it. You just say, this is so very, very good. I often, when teaching young people about worship, I remind them that worship is defined with 2 elements. And you have to have both of these elements for it to truly be worship. One of the elements is to be in awe of. The other element is to express that awe. We often emphasize that second one. In our fellowship, we want to make sure that we're doing exactly the right things. We talk about the 5 acts of worship. I think they're actually better referred to as the 5 expressions of worship. And by the way, there's more than just those 5. Meditation is certainly an expression of worship, but I'm not going to go there. But we often talk about that second one, the idea that we express it correctly. But one of the reasons I'm convinced that we're losing our kids today is because we don't have the lead up to the proper expressions. You can say things and express things that are not necessarily deeply on your heart. And so that's why it's important that number 1 play in here. Number 1 is that you're in awe of. It's that moment that you hold your first grandchild and you look down at the perfect little hands and feet and eyes and you're, It's that moment that you stand on the edge of a cliff and you look out at the sun as it sets in the west. That glowing ball, that orange ball, as it finally goes down behind the horizon and you go, It's that spring morning when you take that walk and the smell is different, it's unique, and you hear the birds and you see the buds on the trees and you're, Awe is an expression that's almost without expression. Sounds a little odd, doesn't it? But it's when your jaw drops open and you have nothing to give other than just an exhale of glory. If we can get our children to get to that level, then their expressions will be good. Their expressions will be from the heart. And by the way, we'll keep them. We won't be losing 70% of our kids to the world. The problem is we have so emphasized appropriate expressions that we forgot the lead up. The lead up is that got to first be in awe. Go to Acts chapter 8. Then both Philip and the eunuch went down into the water. Philip baptized him. When they came up out of the water, the Spirit of the Lord suddenly took Philip away, and the eunuch did not see him again. But he went on his way rejoicing. You know what he was doing? He was relishing the thought. Why was the eunuch in Jerusalem to begin with? Evidently, the eunuch was very well versed in Scripture. He knew what was going on up there and probably was there because of all the information that he already knew with regards to Judaism. And so it's not like, I don't think that this idea of God was a mystery to him. He's actually reading the Old Testament when he pedals on home. And so this is a man who understands the concept of God, but he never relished in it. Because you see, the Old Testament doesn't get us to that point. The Old Testament is designed to lead us to the New Testament. In the New Testament, we see Jesus who loves us enough he'd actually die for us. And you and I sit at the foot of the cross and we look up and we say, a God that would love me that much. And you see, he had just experienced that. Because of what Philip had told him, preaching him Jesus, he had experienced it, and then he went down into the water, and because in the water we have salvation, Colossians chapter 2, Romans chapter 6, verses 3 and 4, Acts chapter 2 and verse 38, in salvation, in the water is the moment of salvation. Because of that, Jesus circumcised his heart, Colossians chapter 2, took sin away, he came up a new creature, Romans chapter 6 and verse 4, and he goes on his way rejoicing because he knows he's a changed being. He is relishing the moment. Happy? Absolutely. But it's a lasting happiness. It's a happiness that will take him all the way home and beyond. Why? Because he acknowledged it, he's interpreted it, and now he's relishing in it. I believe if you'll travel through those 3 points with regards to happy moments, that you too can have holy happiness, and that in that holy happiness that you will see God in a way that perhaps you've never seen him before. Well, there you go. Lord's Day Live. I pray that it's been a blessing to you. It's been a blessing to me. If you're in Louisiana and either of those 2 places that I mentioned earlier, please come out. I'd love to give you a hug. But if you're not, I pray that this has been a blessing, and pray that you continue to pray for our ministry as we continue to pray for you. Sonny Childs, be there. Matthew 16:26.